I want to thank everybody for taking the time to come and learn more about Bricsys and our products. I think we have a value proposition that you'll really appreciate. We're going to try to show you a couple of very unique things this evening, and I hope that you enjoy it. But I am an engineer by training, but after a couple of horrible attempts to demo product, they finally gave me PowerPoint, and that's all they let me have anymore. So I'm going to do my best not to bore you guys with this, but I want to tell you a little bit about the story about Bricsys as a company. So we're going to talk first about who is Bricsys and where do we come from. We've actually been around for 2 decades, and actually a little bit more before that in a different incarnation called BricsNet. And we'll talk about that a little bit in the future. But the past is boring. Let's talk about the future. Let's talk about what Bricscad is and how it can make a difference to you and your business today. And then I want to talk about Bricscad Bim and why you might consider this alternative solution to building information modeling. We know who owns the market. I worked for those guys for 27 years. I have the highest respect for Autodesk and everything they do. But I think we have a solution that's sufficiently unique that you might want to investigate it. We'll talk more about that in a bit. So back last October, we were acquired by Hexagon AB, a large Swedish holding company. Hexagon AB has about 19,500 employees, and probably the most notable company you might think of inside of Hexagon is Leica Geosystems, which many of you may know of, especially if you're in civil and surveying. So Bricsys was established in 2002 after the first company, BricsNet, went away during a market crash. The CEO, Eric DeKaiser, said, hey, everything's going to heck right now. I'm going to exit. But he wasn't quite ready to quit. He came back and said, I've got an idea. I want to come back and try this again. We're going to build a CAD product that's actually priced properly and competes with AutoCAD, but also offers innovations that AutoCAD doesn't. I've been doing this since 2002. We are, like to say, anybody, it's easy to say, words are easy, right? We are relentlessly committed to the success of our customers, unlike some other companies, okay? And the reason that we are is because if you're not successful with our product, then you won't buy it and we won't be around. So we understand the symbiotic relationship between your success and our success, and we're really, really focused on it. And I think Robert can talk more about some pretty cool situations that he's encountered in the last year that he's been with us that really made a difference for customers around the world. One thing that's really neat, and maybe not a key selling point if the software doesn't do everything you need it to do, but we offer perpetual licenses. What a concept. It's easy. I like to say that it's easy. Now, we also offer subscription for customers who want it. About 95% of the licenses we sell today are perpetual. So it proves that there is a place for perpetual license software in the market, and we're growing at 70% year over year. So we think people are finding out about it and making the right choice for them, which in most cases is perpetual. So this is kind of bold, but I'm going to say it. Bricscad is the future of design. So one of the mission statements or taglines we have is that Bricscad is the modern, familiar, and cost-effective computer-aided design software platform for everybody who designs, builds, and manufactures things. And the interesting thing about this is the fact that all of those products are in a single workflow. I'll talk more about that in a minute. The other thing that's important for you to know is that we are based on 2018 DWG, which is critical. So all of the files that you have today that you're using with that other CAD software will load properly, display properly in Bricscad. In fact, one of my CAD manager friends said, you know, everybody should have a copy of Bricscad. Every AutoCAD CAD manager should have a copy, because when files won't open in AutoCAD, all you have to do is load them into Bricscad, save them, and then they'll load properly in AutoCAD. I'm not sure exactly why that happens. I like to think it's because of our relationship with the Open Design Alliance. Now, we're a founding member of the ODA, 1,500 companies who have come together to be the actual legal second source for DWG file access. Don't know how much you guys know about the early history of Autodesk, but back in the early 90s, Autodesk decided they wanted to buy Sofdesk, who was their largest third-party developer. And Sofdesk had begun creating a clone of AutoCAD because they were afraid that Autodesk would cut off their access to AutoCAD because they were becoming so large. When the two companies decided to merge, the Federal Trade Commission told them, you have to divest this technology. It bounced around several times. Parts of it exist in IntelliCAD. But the ODA was formed about a decade ago. And the idea is that this consortium can come together and build a DWG read-write engine that surpasses what the original inventors did. And we're also working on other file types, enablers for Civil, Revit, read and write. Right now we do RFA beautifully. But the idea is that by all of us working together, we're building a consortium, we're building a collective that can really attack this problem of making sure that your design data is in a safe place and always accessible to you. That's the idea. So a very familiar, highly compatible solution. I want to say if you know that other product, you already know Bricscad, okay? Now there are some minor differences. We're not a clone. As Eric DeKaiser, our CEO, likes to say, we're a cyclone. Now that always gets a laugh, but I'm not sure exactly what it means. And it could be detrimental, but I don't think that's what he meant. In terms of compatibility, command compatible, 100%. If you're a keyboard and mouse user like Robert and I promise you, you'll feel right at home. Your existing SUI files, your menus, your palettes, your block libraries, everything moves directly over. And it's macro and script compatible also with AutoCAD. Now that's the main thing, and that's table stakes in this game, right? We have a full Visual Lisp API called Blade. It's available in all versions of Bricscad, including our lowest cost Bricscad Classic, which is our LT equivalent. We're source code compatible with Autodesk ARX 2015 to 2019. One of our sister companies in Hexagon has a product called CAD Work. Some of you may be familiar with it. 12 million lines of code ported completely to Bricscad over a period of about 3 months, and it runs perfectly. In fact, in some cases, it actually runs faster than it did on AutoCAD. Our friends at Leica Geosystems just ported CloudWorks, 7 days, end to end. That was actually pretty amazing. And the performance, again, in Bricscad is really great. So we have the ability to move existing customizations over fairly simply, and we have the technical support to be able to support any developer, corporate developer, or third-party developer who wants to make the move to Bricscad. So buy it once, own it forever. Such a concept. I heard a story about what would happen if owning an automobile was like owning AutoCAD, but I'm not really sure I want to recount it here because it's not very nice. But I get it. Your business is based on your engineering data, and you have to have access to that data all the time, and we want to make sure that you have access to that data all the time. Buy Bricscad once, own it forever. There's a couple really other super cool things about the way that we do this. You guys understand perpetual licenses. You understand this concept of a permanent license. It's funny, when I talk to some younger users, and I'm pretty old, but I mean people who are truly younger than me, they say, well, can you actually buy a permanent software license? I thought you had to rent everything, right? But no, it is true. We also offer a maintenance program that makes continual upgrades pretty easy to do. You have access to all minor upgrades throughout any cycle, and of course the next major upgrade when you're on maintenance. License keys work with any of 15 language versions of Bricscad. Well, that's your choice. Bricscad license keys work anywhere on the planet. We don't feel that it's necessary for you to write us a letter and ask us permission to take your laptop from Belgium to Germany with a copy of Bricscad on it. So you can take a single license key. It works anywhere on the planet. We allow 2 activations per key. So your laptop and your desktop can both be activated. Of course, that's pretty standard. We just ask that you don't use them both at the same time unless you're really good and you can work with both hands. But the idea is that you can be out of the office and have a machine that's fully equipped to roll. When you're out, when you're back in the office, you can be on your desktop machine. And today we run on Windows, Mac OS, and Linux, and we feel that this really gives people a choice. We are probably one of the only professional CAD systems available for Linux. And it is a bit of a struggle for us to maintain these additional platforms, but we feel that it really brings a viable solution to a large part of the industry. And we'll continue to support that as long as our customers want it. So So let's talk about the product family quickly. So this is my cool idea of a build out slide. I like that. That's a great animation. That's the art for me tonight. The first product in the family is Bricscad Classic. We like to call it the AutoCAD LT replacement. It has all the functionality of LT plus. It has this wonderful Lisp editing and operating environment with Blade, the visual editor. We also have some great innovations in Bricscad Classic, including Blockify, which is a great command that Heidi will show you guys in a little bit that can really help you manage the size of drawings with repetitive objects in them. Now, the next version is Bricscad Pro, and I'm bashing Autodesk already. It's a better AutoCAD, guys. It really is. Not because it's less expensive, which it is, but because it actually offers all of the performance you're accustomed to, plus some really great functionality that you may not be accustomed to. Our quad cursor is one of my favorites. You know, people talk about the fact that, oh, my screen is littered with palettes and toolbars and all these things. How can I get more drawing space? And a lot of times you go to a second monitor to move assets onto that so that you have more room to see what you're actually working on. With the quad cursor, I can actually turn off all of my toolbars, ribbons, and palettes and operate completely in a head-up mode. And it uses machine intelligence to actually make predictive choices about the commands you have or the objects you've picked and the commands that are most likely to be used against those objects next. And that's kind of unique functionality in the market, but it is something that's just a hallmark of the type of things that we build every day at Bricsys. Platinum is our advanced 3D modeling system. It is actually the basis for two additional workflows that are a part of the Bricscad family. First, our Bim solution, and we call this Real Bim in DWG. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few moments. And our mechanical solution. Now, I think that we were probably told maybe a decade and a half, 2 decades ago, that DWG was not a suitable platform for mechanical CAD or for building information modeling. That's not true. DWG is a file format. It's a storage mechanism. It has nothing to do with the way that those objects are represented in the computer's memory. And think about how fast computers have gotten over the last 2 decades. So DWG is here. It's always been here. It's still here. And we're going to show you that it's a viable platform to do real work on, and one that you're already familiar with. So retraining is not an issue. Now, all of these fit into a single license called Bricscad Ultimate, and that's an end-to-end solution. And they all plug into Bricsys 24/7, which is the best common data environment that you don't know about. So we actually have the leading CDE in the Benelux countries for the construction industry. But you know how small Benelux is. We really haven't broken out yet. This will be a big year for 24/7 in the US. We're starting to get some big customers in the US who are interested in the technology. And we're also going to be releasing a different version of 24/7 later this year that gives our users the ability to store, communicate, and vault files regardless of the size of your work group or the location of the people who are in that work group. That's the product family. Let's talk about what it looks like. Like I said, I really wanted to show it to you guys, but they wouldn't let me do that. So Heidi's going to do that after I'm done. We really offer freedom of choice for CAD administrators. We have a unique user interface look of our own, but if you wish, you can take your existing SUI files from AutoCAD, load them directly. As I said, palettes, menus, everything can look the same. That's your choice. We feel that a simpler UI makes more sense because it gives the user less confusion and less options. The workflow is actually baked into the user interface. This is the user interface of Bricscad Bim, and you can see that it's quite simple for a Bim product, especially compared to some others I've seen recently. The idea is reuse your existing or move forward and try it a different way, but all in one product that supports the way that you work today, and especially supports the fact that we don't want you to have to retrain your users to move to this product. That's the main, most important goal for us, is to give you a familiar environment that you can be productive in immediately. We like to say that Bricscad is the best for 2D drafting. Again, all of the commands that you expect are there. We also offer some great AI functionality, machine learning functionality to assist in drafting, and there's a lot of great ones in the pipeline too. Elise will talk more about that a little bit later. But this concept of documentation, you know, I heard about 20 years ago in the industry that drawings were going away and people were going to build everything off of the 3D model. Well, I know in certain areas that is possible, but I still see a heck of a lot of drawings out there. Billions, hundreds of billions of drawings. And we need to be able to create them, we need to be able to edit them, we need to be able to publish them, and we need to be able to access drawings from any era of the AutoCAD timeline. We read drawings back to AutoCAD release 11 very efficiently, all the way up through 2018. And we also have a pretty powerful 3D modeler. We've taken a little bit different approach. Our modeler is based on ASIS from Spatial and Dassault, but we forked a little bit and we do some pretty cool things with what we call direct modeling. So it's a history-free modeler. It gives us the ability to manipulate solids very effectively. It also gives us the ability to import solids from any other product. We can import geometry. And because it is simply comes in as geometry, we have the ability to manipulate that just like it's native, which is pretty powerful. And then I want to say we're probably the best solution for MCAD users. If you create small to medium-sized assemblies, anything under 10,000 parts, you really need to look at this solution. It is super effective. It runs great. And again, it supports that same workflow that you're familiar with, and that's drawing an XREF. Works really well. I want to show you a short video, because again, like I said, they won't let me demo. It shows some of the mechanical functionality. First off, of course, we expect exploded views in any modeler, but the ability to automatically explode any constrained assembly, and actually you can drive that explosion to whatever you need to create your final representation of that part on the drawing sheet. We have over 30,000 parametric parts that you can access. You can create your own. Have some pretty phenomenal functionality called Parametrize. Elise will show you that later on. Parametrize lets you take any solid and completely constrain it in a matter of seconds. Here you can see that we're using a parameterized model. We're able to drive that via equations that we can create. And we also have the ability to create some very unique 3D sheet metal forms. We use a pretty unique concept behind the way that we do sheet metal. One of the things that you run into with sheet metal is that if you try to deeply modify a sheet metal form, a lot of times the history tree will break because the co-edge between different components, for example, a flange in the body, will break down over time. And what happens if you try to manipulate that model too much, it'll eventually break, it will cease to regenerate, and you have to start from scratch. We use lofts to generate our sheet metal parts. So you can take a part and drive it. You can actually take a solid and create a sheet metal form from an imported solid. You can completely change the layout of a sheet metal body to make it manufacturable, and it will always regenerate in Bricscad sheet metal, which is a part of our mechanical tool. So, the value prop. Top items that get me excited about Bricscad, and I think will get you excited about Bricscad. Cost-effective, multi-platform, perpetual network and volume licensing, a very short learning curve for people using AutoCAD today. Very small installer footprint. This is interesting. Bricscad's installer footprint is about 375 megabytes for the entire thing. And when you watch our back-end systems, you watch people come up, they create a Bricsys account, they download Bricscad, then they download Bricscad, then they download Bricscad. Because the first time they thought, oh, this has to be broken. The second time they're like, oh damn, is it still broken? And the third time they go, I guess that's all there is to it. And if you're familiar with this 9 or 6.9 megabyte or gigabyte download, this is quite a different thing. So I said, guys, what if we just put some words on the web page that say, the download is 375 megabytes. Kind of helps fix the triple download problem. But it happens so fast, what the heck? Bandwidth is free today. Modern code. Bricscad's been around for almost 20 years, but it's been completely refactored in the last 10. And we're constantly changing Bricscad and refactoring large portions of Bricscad to make it perform better. Superior memory utilization. We can run on hardware that other products wouldn't even launch on. Superior graphics with Redway 3D. Advanced multi-threading. You know, CAD is a very single-threaded environment. It's very, very difficult to multi-thread a CAD tool. But there are certain parts of the CAD workflow that can be multi-threaded, like file load and rendering and drawing view creation in Bim, for example. So in each of those areas where we can see solid uplift in performance by multi-threading, we make the extra effort to multi-thread those sections of the code. High API compatibility, as you've heard, and of course, the best compatibility with 2018 drawing. That's Bricscad Bim. That's Bricscad. Let's talk about Bricscad Bim for a moment. We like to call this a modern approach to building information modeling. Not that that 20-year-old competitor of ours is not modern. I mean, it's in V20 now. It's got to be good, right? So last year, AEC Magazine published this cover. Martin Day, who's a good frenemy of ours. Martin's quite a character. He came to our event in London. He saw the demonstration that we did of Bricscad Bim at the time, and he wrote a pretty exciting article that caused some consternation with our friends in Sausalito, or sorry, San Rafael, wherever the heck they are, San Francisco. They keep moving around, I don't know. But this idea of being able to envision anything starting in pure geometry. So think about workflows in BIM today. Multiple tools, massing in one tool, creating a building information model in another tool, potentially doing drafting in another tool, okay? This idea is something that we've been looking at for a long time, and we said there's got to be a better way to do this. The ability to create simply at LOD 100 in massing solids, and then automatically convert those solids to a real BIM. Make the jump to LOD 200 in one step using machine learning tools, and Elise will show some of those. We also have our propagate workflow, which allows us to take a detail in a building and replicate it throughout the entire building with full user control. So this, and I'm getting ahead of myself, but I thought this was just the greatest title, so I just had to show this to you guys. Maybe it's bad form, I don't know, I'm just gonna say I love it. So what's different about our approach to BIM? Well, we like to say real BIM in real 3D, the ability to go from concept to construction documentation in a single product, in a single workflow. So when you look at the workflow, everything is in one piece. You know, a lot of times what happens in a conventional BIM workflow is you will start in a product like SketchUp, or you will use Dynamo to create a series of forms that you make a decision on. Is this the shape we actually want this building to be? Is this the way it needs to look? Is this what we want to produce for the customer? And then you'll go back and start over again. The thing about conventional BIM that makes it a little bit tough is its roots came from mechanical design. If you think about the Revit product, it came from a group of people who were at Parametric Technologies who make Pro Engineer. And as a mechanical engineer, I can tell you, mechanical modeling is really easy when you know what you're going to make. Because you sketch, parameterize, extrude, sweep, revolve. Sketch, parameterize, extrude, sweep, revolve. And that's the workflow. And that workflow has been moved into the AEC space with products like Revit. We've taken a little bit different approach. There's no reason to build your massing model out front and then figure out how to bring it in and convert it into a BIM. We allow you to design freely in solids with push-pull, just like you would in SketchUp. Then you run Bimify, and that same model is classified automatically. And we've got about a, 97 to 98% accuracy rate on that automatic classification. We showed it to a customer one time over a video conference, and she went like this, and everybody said, "Oh my God, Barbara, are you okay?" She goes, "Yeah, you just showed me a week's worth of work in 2 seconds. I can't believe it, I love it," right? But this idea of being able to not lose any of the work you've put in. You start in solids, you Bimify, you raise the level of detail of that model. And then that massing model becomes the BIM. And from there, you use the propagate workflow to replicate details across the model. For example, in any wall composition, I may want to go back and adjust the gypsum board height so that I've got clearance from the floor. Now, normally, that's a detail that the average BIM tech wouldn't even mess with, right? They're gonna go through the whole building and do this in every single place where that wall composition meets the floor? No, I'm just gonna do it over here. I'll extract my detail through that, and I'm set. And that's fine until you do your takeoffs, and then all your takeoffs are wrong. Because the model is at an inconsistent LOD, right? With Bricscad Bim, adjust it once, replicates across the entire building, again, with your assurance that those are the choices you wanted to make, and you'll see more of that from Elise. And then, of course, the ability to create fully associative construction documentation. As I said, with multi-threading on a multi-core machine, we can update drawings continuously as we're changing the model. And they're always in sync and always up to date. And there'll be more in that area coming out this fall with V20. I think this idea is one that really resonates with users. This idea of starting out in a single product and working through that workflow in a single product, again, based on DWG and XREF. And because of the fact that we're based on DWG and XREF, it also gives us some pretty amazing functionality in terms of multi-user access to a BIM model. And that's something else that we're delivering some additional functionality in later this year. But automatic classification algorithms and consistent development of level of detail. And we feel that that's what really sets Bricscad Bim apart from other products. Two things that you'll see later in Elise's presentation, the ability to use Bimify and the propagate workflow. Model it once, use it many times throughout the entire model with continuous LOD improvement. And then without documentation, you're not going to get too far, right? My favorite image whenever I think of construction is two guys standing in front of a Dodge pickup with a big roll of drawings on the hood, okay? And people can tell you, yeah, I got my iPad out there or my Tough Book, but there's still a big book of drawings laying across the hood of somebody's truck because that's the way engineers and architects and construction guys take information from the design phase to the actual build phase. And that's the same thing in manufacturing also. We know that documentation is critical. And we have all the tools that you expect in terms of 2D documentation, full compatibility with sheet sets, the ability to extract schedules dynamically and create them, and place them on sheets and have them update automatically. And then, as I said, in a multi-core machine, the ability to actually update drawing sections live as the BIM model changes, and that's something you can select or deselect depending on what your needs are. Now, all this is good, but when you start to talk about working between disciplines, there's this scenario of how do I move the data back and forth? We are a member of Building Smart International. We support the Open BIM standard. In fact, the core database schema for Bricscad Bim is IFC. So we support IFC to the nth degree because we know it's critical. If you want to move data between different systems, you have to have a neutral file format that works. Now, there's a lot of people who say IFC doesn't do it, IFC doesn't cut it. IFC 4.0 support is coming soon in Bricscad V20, and I think you'll be really amazed at the opportunities that it gives you to select the tools that you use for MEP, select the tools you use for structural, and still have a viable workflow across multiple vendors. That's the whole idea behind this, and that's the idea that we've supported since the beginning. And I think the fact that the schema for the core database is IFC gives us the ability to import and export IFC files without translation. If you think about that, some vendors really don't want you to write a good IFC model because then there's a way to get data out of their proprietary system. We feel like we cannot succeed in this market. We are not experts in every discipline. We're CAD people, we're geometry people, we're display people, we're modelers. We are not structural engineers, we are not MEP engineers. So we know that we have to give our developers the options to be able to import and export data freely, and therefore we support IFC. So Bricscad Bim offers a complete end-to-end workflow. From design tools, AI design assistance, materials and composition, structural modeling, HVAC, documentation workflows, interoperability with other systems. We feel like it is a really good solution for just about everybody out there. We don't ask you to replace your current BIM tool, we just ask you to take a look at the way we do BIM and see if it makes sense for you. In conclusion, nice job on the timer there, buddy. Simple, easy installation, transition, simple, easy installation, and a simple and easy transition. We talked about this earlier, right? From AutoCAD. It's an evolving platform that you already know. There's a lot of innovation in Bricscad, and you're going to see that in the next two presentations. And finally, it's super cost effective. And everybody has to like that, right? 0-0, Heidi, it's your turn.
Good job, Don.
My friend, thank you. I get a beer now.
Yeah, you're done.
My friend Heidi Hewitt, some of you may know her from her tenure at Autodesk. She is now the product owner for Bricscad Bim. She's in charge.
Bricscad.
Oh, Bricscad, sorry. I said Bim because that's the last thing that was in my mind. She's the product owner for Bricscad. She's awesome. She's better than me. Go.
So yeah, as Don said, I come from a long history of using AutoCAD. I worked for Autodesk for 26 years and always doing something related to AutoCAD, product support, training, blogging, all kinds of things, technical things. So coming to Bricscad just over a year ago, I was a little bit hesitant when I went over to Belgium and met with them because, well, I'd worked for Autodesk and I was like, I love AutoCAD, right? So I can't get any better than that. But sitting in presentations and meeting with the development team and seeing what they have already done and what they were working on in the future, I was blown away. And I just remember sitting there with my mouth half open thinking, you know, saying, DWG, that's DWG? You're doing that in DWG, you can't be doing that in DWG. It was really amazing, and I think that's what you're going to see some of what I'm showing you and also what Elisa shows you later. So I'm going to just take you a little bit through some of the things that are familiar with Bricscad. Let's start with that. So what is Bricscad? Well, I think of it as several different things. One, it's affordable, and Robert's going to talk more about that a little bit later. So how many of you use other software now, maybe AutoCAD or other DWG software? Okay. Yeah, all right. Most of you. So we know a lot of people are looking for another option, an affordable option. That's what Robert's going to talk about. Coming from over 30 years of using AutoCAD, I didn't want to jump into something different. And what you'll see with Bricscad is it's very familiar. It's not a clone, like Don said, it's not a clone, and it's not, you know, the same software underneath. Totally different software. That's why it's such a small download and so quick to install, because it actually is different software. But you'll see from the user interface that it's very familiar to use. So I'll talk about that and I'll take you in to show you that. So native Dwg format, that's a big deal, right? Dwg, we've been emphasizing that and can't emphasize that enough. Don mentioned the APIs. We have Lisp, we have all the various other APIs that you're used to having with AutoCAD. Those are available in Bricscad with Bricscad as well. And then again, the user interface, I'll talk about that. Well, let's see. And just things got a little bit dark there for a second. But we are always looking as we improve and add on to Bricscad. We're always looking to the future, listening to what users want, especially users that are looking for a solution from AutoCAD. And we are continuing to develop in that direction. So the last thing that I want to mention there is innovative. So affordable, familiar, Don talked about these as well, and innovative. And that's what I'm going to show you today is just some of the tools that are really different, the things that I was sitting there in Belgium a year ago and saying, wow, can you really do that in DWG? So we'll talk about those. I'll show you Blockify and Parametrize. There's a whole lot more I'd like to show you, but that's all I have time for. So I have Bricscad V19 open, and if you just take a look at the interface a little bit here, you might see that it looks kind of familiar. We've got toolbars, we've got the ribbon across the top. All of this is customizable. We've got palettes, the command line at the bottom. This can all be moved around, turned on and off, so complete control like you're used to in AutoCAD. So I won't talk a lot about the UI there. I just want you to know that it's you're able to customize it just like you're used to. What I want to do, though, is just start on this drawing here. This is a floor plan, a couple floor plans here. And whatever industry you're in, you likely use blocks, right? Does anybody use blocks in here? Okay, hopefully. If you don't raise your hand, then something is not very efficient with your drawings. Do you ever have a problem with your drawings where maybe you had some blocks inserted, and maybe they got exploded, or somebody just didn't know how to use CAD very well and they drew every symbol individually? Does that ever happen? You get some drawings that are kind of a mess? Well, let's take a look at this drawing here. I'm going to select some of these entities, like this receptacle here, and I'll just do a select similar. And I know it's really small, but if you look over here at the properties window on the right, you can see that it found almost 4,000 entities. So something happened with those. They might have been inserted as receptacles, but they got exploded or something happened, right? If I do that with these other, with all the entities, I've got switches over here. I'm just going to select all those entities. And again, we'll just do a select similar. So between the receptacles, the little light symbols, and the switches, I've got, oh, it's selecting. Yeah, I made those switches with splines, so they're a little bit painful there. But so it's going through the drawing, it's selecting those. And again, I'm just going to look at the properties here and see how many they have. It's, yeah, almost 4,000 with all those different entities. What I'm going to do, though, is actually turn those into blocks. Now, what if you did this? Whatever symbols, whatever industry you work in, what if you have a drawing like this that's really messed up and you want it to be clean? Because maybe you're doing attribute extraction or block data extraction and you want to count those symbols, right? You have to have them as blocks. How long would it take you to do that? What would you do? Ow, it'd be painful, right? Job security, okay, because somebody's going to sit there doing this really monotonous work to get all these symbols converted inserted at the right way, the right size, the right location, the right rotation, all of that, right? Ow, painful. Okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to select one of these symbols, the symbols that make up the receptacle, and I'm going to use this tool called Blockify. It's one of our AI tools, okay? Select Blockify. I'm just going to take the defaults there. It's going to go through the whole drawing with those three symbols. It's going to look for those three entities, look for anything that matches those three entities in my entire drawing, and it took me longer to talk about it, but if we look at the command line there, you'll see 0.05 seconds. That's how long it took to go through the drawing and find all instances that match that one set that I selected. Now it turned that one into a block, and it turned all the other matching ones into a block. I'm going to go ahead and select similar, and now you can see over here it found 96 of those entities that it inserted. Okay, how long would that take you? I don't even want to think about it. Okay, well, that was a simple example. Now I'm going to go over, and actually what I want to point out there, though, is once it did that, it's the same thing as if you had done it manually, okay? It created a block definition, it inserted them, it's the same thing, so now you can rename it. It just gave it some name, block 1, block 2. You can rename it, you can put them on the right layer, whatever you want to do. Everything you already know, the tools that you're already used to working with, layers, blocks, changing properties, all of that. Okay, it just did that creation very quickly. Well, over here, and it looks like a Los Angeles freeway little pileup, okay? So we have these blocks, because that was a really simple example that I showed you, right? There's a couple lines and circles. Over here, I've got two sets of entities that make up two blocks, these little motorcycles. And this was actually a real example that came into the office in Belgium, where a customer had some drawing, and it was huge, and it was really slow to load, and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with Bricscad. Well, when the developers took a closer look at it, they realized there was nothing wrong with Bricscad. The problem was that in this whole big complex, this big campus that they had designed, they had parking lots, and in the parking lots, they got some little symbol off the internet, all these little motorcycles and car symbols, and inserted them like hundreds of times in this drawing just to make it look cute, and then they got exploded. And there, these, if I select one of these, I'll go ahead and pick this one here. When we look at properties, just that has 239 entities in it, just a bunch of little segments, okay? So that drawing was really, really big and really, really slow because of all these pretty little symbols they had in there. Okay, so what I'm going to do is use Blockify here, And again, same process. I'll just select the entities, use Blockify, goes through the whole drawing, and within 0.06 seconds, it actually detected over here in this big pileup, it converted those symbols into blocks, okay? So you can see the same thing over here. I've got the other ones. This one is the other symbol or the other type of motorcycle. I'll repeat it so you can see that. Okay, use that. I'm going to use Blockify. Just take the defaults. And again, now this other one has been converted into blocks. Okay, so that's pretty cool. Yeah? Yeah. It's one of the magic commands. Okay. This is 2D. The same thing works in 3D. I'm going to go ahead and open up a model here. And this is actually a model of my house. I live in a duplex. So I created this all just using my AutoCAD skills. This is the first thing I did in Bricscad once I came over. Just wanted to see if I could use what I already knew about modeling, and I did. I modeled it all using what I knew, plus some extra cool tools. But the way I modeled this is I did half of it. It's a duplex, so I modeled half of it, and then I mirrored it to the other side. Okay, so there's at least 2 entities of everything, almost everything in the drawing. Okay. If you look over here at the file size, it's a pretty big model. It's over 8 megabytes. And what I want to show you here is Blockify is so easy to use that you might use it for things you wouldn't even normally consider. Like with this model, I would probably not make blocks out of most of this geometry because there's only 2 instances of a lot of it. For example, like here around the window, this little window trim, there's 4 instances of that, 2 on each side of the duplex. But still, it wouldn't be worth the trouble for me to create a block definition, insert it for those few instances, okay? But with Blockify, what I'm going to do is go ahead and use Blockify again, and I'll just take everything in the drawing. I'm just going to have it go through the entire drawing. And what it does is I didn't even have to tell it which objects. It's going to go through the whole drawing, and it's going to find anything that has at least one other instance, and it's going to turn it into a block. Okay, so just like that, in 2.2 seconds, it went through and it blockified anything that had more than one instance in it. Okay, so over here I can see, now you may think, well, maybe I don't want those to be blocks, and you may not, but look at what happens here. You can always explode it later. I'm going to go ahead and save this drawing to a different name, just so I don't override my other one. Okay, now if we look at the file size, it brought it down to 1.96, okay, just by running Blockify for 2 seconds, okay? So you'll find instances of it where why not use it, right? Okay, so that's Blockify. That one's pretty cool. The next thing I want to show you is another magic command. I figure if it ends in ifi or is, or ize, I-Z-E, it must be magic, right? So I don't want to save that. All right, now we're going to look at this other model. All right, this is the same house model of it. And I'm working on a bar in my little duplex here. I want to design a bar. So I knew the space that I wanted to put it in, but I really didn't know how big, or I had a rough idea what I wanted to look at, what I wanted it to look like. But we're designers, right? We don't know, like Dawn kind of pointed out, you don't know until the end what exactly it's going to look like. That's why it's design, it's evolving. So I'm going to show you here the end result, and then I'm going to show you how easy it is to get to this end result. So this is, it's got these shelves, these glass doors and shelves in here. That's a kegerator in the middle. And then, and then it's got a refrigerator for wine, and it's got a freezer to keep the glasses cold. Okay. By the way, we do have the fridge, the freezer, and the kegerator. We just haven't had time to build this yet. So here we've got this part, and this is what really struck me and why I said, yes, I want to come work for Bricsys, is because I used everything I already know. For 30 years, everything I've been using, blocks and layers and XREFs, I just applied that. This is actually this is a block, okay, but it's using special tools that are unique to Bricscad, which allow me, using this, I'm going to select this block, and if we look over here in the Properties panel, you can see all of these parameters. So this is a 3D parametric block, and you could call it a component, and Elise will talk more about that, I think, components. But basically, it's just a block As far as I'm concerned, it's a block, and I insert it with a special Bricscad command, and now I have control over these parameters in it, in the block. And I'm going to show you how easy it was to make it in just a minute. But for example, as I'm trying to figure out, how big this thing's going to be and what size to cut the wood, I'll go over here and let's say, kind of change the orientation so you can see a little bit. Okay, I've got various things like maybe the glass door width. Right now it says 16, let's change that to 12. Okay, so those change. The height of the wood panel height, these panels on the side, I really do want to make it a little bigger. I'll try what 52 looks like if I make it a little taller. I've got the distance between shelves, so I'll go ahead and change that. Maybe try 7. How about the distance at the bottom shelf? Yeah, let's see. Bottom shelf, wood bottom shelf height. Let's make that a little bit taller. Okay, so you've got all this flexibility. Easy to use, right? I don't need to be an expert in anything. It's just properties, and I'm changing their values. Okay, so that's the cool part. That's what your users, are any of you CAD managers? Yeah, okay. So that's what your users would experience. But if they want to make their own, or you're the CAD manager and you want to make your own really cool smart blocks, let's see how easy that is to do. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close this. And here I have the original model. So this is just dumb solids. I could have created this in SketchUp or in Bricscad or AutoCAD or any solid modeler and brought it into Bricscad. So it's just dumb solids, okay? And if I open up the parameters panel, you can see that there's nothing there because there are no parameters because these are just solids. So what I'm going to do is just select the top part of this. I'm only concerned with the top part for my design in this case. So I just select all these entities, these solid entities, and then I'm going to use this other magic command. Let me change my workspace. I could type it in, but oops, the wrong workspace. Okay, so, and I could use the quad. Don mentioned a quad, so it's available right here. I'm going to show that to you. This is the quad, which is unique to Bricscad as well, and it's very contextual. So depending on what entities you have selected or what the state is that your software is in, you'll have access to various tools. But I have worked with AutoCAD users long enough to know often you just turn off whatever is new. So I'm going to show you how to get to it another way. So we've got the parameterize command. And, oh, no, I didn't change. I have to change my license. I was messing around with this. Let me go back to my, I'll turn on parameterize. So, okay, I'm going to show you this now. Didn't mean to, but there's a really cool command here called run as level. So when you install the trial, have any of you installed the Bricscad trial? A couple people? What's really cool is that really fast download that Don was telling you about. It has everything he talked about, the whole family. It's got mechanical, BIM, and core Bricscad from classic all the way up to platinum, which is more AutoCAD plus more. So all of that is then in that one install, and you can actually, as CAD managers, you can test it out using this run as level command. So right now, I just entered run as level. I'm going to look at my Bricscad license, and I'm set to Pro because I was testing something out and forgot to change it back. I'm going to go ahead and set it to the Platinum license, which is the full-blown highest level of Bricscad that you can have. And then I actually, unfortunately, do have to close that and relaunch it so that it knows which license level to run at. Okay, so let me go ahead and open that file again, or Hutch. Okay. So now I'll have access to those tools. So it's really cool as a CAD manager. Again, you can test at different levels. You can see what it's like to run in Classic or LT mode, or what it, if you need more tools in Pro mode or Platinum. Okay, so definitely a good tool to be aware of. All right, so I'll go ahead and select these entities. Let me show my parameters panel again. Nothing up my sleeve. There's nothing there. It's not parameterized. I'll select these tools, and then I'll use this parameterized tool, or select those entities, use the parameterized tool, and there, just that quickly, it was able to parameterize, add parameters to all of those entities that I had selected. So if you look here, it can be overwhelming, especially if you've not worked with constraints before. It can be a little bit scary, but it's actually, there's different ways to sort on the data, and you can tell by some of the different names and the maybe the values, depending how you modeled it, you can tell what they apply to. But there's other things too, like if I come in here, let me zoom out. If I go in here and I say, if I right-click on something, let me try, where's this one here? I'm going to right-click and choose Animate. And you can see it's changing the overall height. So depending which parameter I'm on, I can animate it and it will show me. If that's not enough information, you still don't know exactly what that parameter is driving, then there's other things you can do. Like I can come over here and I can hold the control key and pick on a face. Let me just go ahead and select one of these faces. Okay, so again, here you can see it's got distance constraints. There's 4 constraints. This is actually a little bit easier to see where you've got the darker row there, the darker magenta color. That's telling you which different constraints are applied as I selected that main face. So it's really easy between here to identify and tell which faces, which constraints are being applied. And then once you've identified those in various ways, either using the parameters panel or using the graphics here on the screen, then you can go in and you can either rename them to something more meaningful, which is what I did so that it was really easy for me to use it in the drawing, or for your users if you're actually creating these for other people to use. You can rename them to something more meaningful. You can also control which ones are visible. And you can, of course, change their values. So parameterize, it's a magic tool, happened within a split second to add all those parameters. But it does its best AI, right? It does its best job at trying to determine what it is you want based on how you modeled the design. It may not be exactly what you had intended. You may want some slightly different relationships. So there's a whole bunch of tools that you can use, all the various parametric tools. There's 3D constraints that you can apply and various distance and other constraints. So you have complete control to do that. You could do it all manually if you want. You could do it manually from the start, but this is a really good way to just start it very quickly and then make a few minor edits as opposed to having to do it from scratch, the entire model. So after I selected that, it fully constrained all those entities, okay? So pretty cool, another magic command. All right, that is, so what I want to emphasize, that's the last thing that I want to show you here, but what I really want to emphasize, and I can't say this enough, is how this is just taking what people already know. Okay, you already know AutoCAD, you already know DWG. Those same tools and those same commands let you get up to this point where you're creating either 2D or 3D models, 2D documentation or 3D models, and you can simply apply new tools to that, the BIM tools that Elisa will talk about, or the mechanical tools. It's just a little bit more learning curve for a lot more functionality. Okay? All right. Well, thank you. I hope I'm on time. I don't even know where the time is. Oh, I'm good. Okay. Thank you. All right. Lisa's up next.
All right, good evening, everyone. Today I'm going to give a presentation about the future of AI in CAD. I'm just going to wait a few seconds till the slide is going to pop up. There we go. So I am a software developer for the R&D AI team at Bricsys. And we mainly focus on creating intelligent tools that can help the designer through the entire design process. So, how can AI enhance CAD or BIM modeling? Well, AI can never do the entire job of the architect, and that's why there has to be an intelligent collaboration between the human and the machine. Of course, each should be able to do what it's good at. So the designer might start with identifying the design goals and then starts prototyping. While he's prototyping, the machine can give him some suggestions as inspiration. But then, of course, it is up to the designer to make these style choices by keeping in mind the aesthetics of the building. And when he is done with the conceptual design of the building, he can start with creating a detail. As Don and Heidi already told you, creating these details might take a lot of time. So that's good that the machine can do this repetitive task for us. And when your entire project is done, you can also ask the machine to extract the design documentation out of it. So as you have heard, it is more than just AI. Of course, AI and other algorithms have to be reliable in their part of the job. But because in CAD, you cannot let the computer do everything for you, so you have to interact with it. And if you have to interact with it, you have to talk in the same language. You should be able to tell, like, hey, I want this roof to be up a little bit higher, and then the machine should be able to know which of all these geometries is the roof. So BIM data can help a lot to get a common understanding of the project. Also, parameters can help a lot here. So, and of course, because you have to interact with it a lot, it's really important that this all can happen through an intuitive user interface. Of course, this makes a lot of sense for the user, but also for the machine, it's an opportunity to actually gather a lot of information out of all these interactions. So the first option is artificial creativity. And an example of this is generative design. And generative design is a design exploration process in which you frame your problem by specifying the constraints and establishing the goal you want to achieve. You see this bike on the right here. The constraint is clearly that it should be able to carry the weight of the one who's riding it. And the goal you want to achieve is that it should have a minimum of weight. So, of course, you can discuss whether this is a nice bike or not, but I think this is not really artificial creativity yet, because you have to specify these constraints yourself. I think in the future, it should be possible that the machine can come up with these constraints by themselves, by learning from the environment or learning from previous buildings or projects, or just by reading the design documentation. So the next option is increasing automation, and this is something that our team really focuses on. So we actually want to help the architect by eliminating some time-consuming steps out of the design process, but we also want to allow him to work with multiple alternatives at the same time. And like simply said, we just want to give the architect the freedom to be really creative. So now I will just show you some tools that we have been working on that can help. First up, how can prototyping in 3D made be as effortless as in 2D? So 2D models are often very error-prone, and you have to manage a lot of different 2D drawing sheets. So that can be very time-consuming. And that's why we created something that's called QuickDraw. And QuickDraw makes it able that you can start in 3D and like stay in 3D through the entire design process. So I'll show you a quick marketing video.
QuickDraw allows you to easily create and edit rectangular and L-shaped rooms. When starting the command, a special cursor appears, indicating the location of the walls that will be placed. You can either left-click to specify start and endpoint, or use the Tab key to switch between dynamic dimensions. You can change the room height and wall and slab thickness using the command line. You can continue creating more rooms. Note that the cursor will snap to align with existing walls. Editing existing rooms is possible as well. Clicking the blue plus icon will create an exact copy of this floor. After exiting the command, all entities will be classified and spatial locations will be assigned.
So this is a good example of the intuitive user interface I was talking about. It's really easy to draw an entire building with this. And we're also working on another prototyping tool to create stairs. And here you can see, like in 2 simple clicks, you have an entire stair. There we go. And yeah, after the stair is done, you can still use direct modeling to change it, but you can also choose to work with the parameters that were automatically created when you create a stair, like the stair width or the step height. Very easy. So how to add a lot of BIM data in just a few seconds. So in Bricscad, we have like this philosophy of geometry first. So when you're done with all your direct modeling, you still have to add all the BIM data. And this can be very time consuming. So that's why we created Bimify. And in this video, you can see that none of the solids have any BIM information, and there is no spatial location information. And Bimify actually uses machine learning to classify all solids and block rifts. It also will add spatial location information. It detects profiles, creates rooms, detects outer and inner walls, and also will create a section for each floor and each elevation. So here, the properties of a solid, so you can see no BIM information yet. So we'll just start up the Bimify command, which is in the quad. And there we go, a simple dialog in which you can choose which options you want to do. So the classification, the profiles, the room detection and spatial location detection, and the sections. Just a simple click on the OK button, and there we go. And it's all Bimified. So as you see now in the structure browser, the building is added with floors, and all solids have a BIM information now. So you have walls, for example. We will just, yeah. And then we select the walls, and we will isolate them. So as you can see, yes, these are all walls. So Bimify predicted it's all correct, of course. And when we activate the section right now, and now you can see all the rooms that were created. You can also have a closer look at the properties. So you can see the room height, the volume, but also on which floor it is, and so on. And you can actually also use Bimify in each stage of your project. So when you want to add like a new floor, it will only add BIM information to that new floor. So it will not change any information that is added yet. So it's very easy to use. All right, so that's one tool to add BIM information, and we're also working on a new tool, which is called Automatch, and I will just show you how it works. So here you see that there's a composition for one inner wall and one outer wall, and we just start the dialog, and we hit the autocomplete button, and now all inner walls will have the same composition, and all outer walls will have the cavity wall composition. So this is like just a very simple example to show you how it works, but this also works for window parameters or for more complex compositions and so on. So next, how can we let designers create 3D models with a fine-grained level of detail? Well, in other CAD software, these are your alternatives. You could choose to grind it manually, but that takes a lot of time. You could also use like normal copy or array commands, but we all know that details are connected to the environment, so that won't work very well. Another option is to just make your details in 2D, but then you're left with an incomplete 3D model, so that's not really great either. And the last option other CAD software gives you is templates, but that prevents free modeling, so we do not want that either. So that's why we created Propagate. And here in this video, you can see that on the right, there is no detail yet, but on the left, you already have a detail. So we just select the base solids, and then we select our detail solids. We hit Propagate, and as you can see, now the detail suggestions are everywhere it's possible. We apply them, And as you can see, the detail is now also on the right. So propagate really looks for all similar locations where this detail may be able to fit. And you also saw that there are like widgets popping up, and this allows you to apply or reject a suggestion. So the user is still in full control here. Another example of this in structural is here. So we have a detail created, and nowhere else is this detail. We just select the base solids again, and hit propagate, then select the detail. And all the suggestions are loaded. And then we choose again to apply them all. So next example is just to show you that it also works with windows. So we just will create one window there. Then you already know what's coming up. We will click the base solids, click the detail, start propagate, and we will now have windows everywhere. That might be a bit too many windows. So we will select the top row and reject those. We will also select the middle row and reject those as well, and then apply all the others. There we go, windows everywhere now. We're also still working on making this better by creating standalone details. And these details, you will be able to save and load them from a library, and they will also be fully parameterized. So they actually will also work on places where there's a different profile. Like you see here, is top and bottom profile is different. And also where there's a different angle, this detail will also fit. So here is our detail from the library. And we will just show you that these are parameterized. There we go. We will animate this angle. We will also put a different profile on it. And now we will add this detail by just simply drag and drop it on the drawing. Now it will look for all the similar locations, so also where there's a different angle or where the profile is not the one from the detail. And 1 second. All right, so there are all our suggestions. And we will just apply them, and you will see the detail everywhere. So in the future, we want to continue to create tools like this to help the architect. And we want to do this while keeping the architect's dream of full control and free modeling alive. So thank you for your attention. And up next is Robert Green, our Director of Implementation.
Excellent job, you did great. Hey, I know a few of you guys, I think, right? And we'll wait for the slides. Yeah, okay. Right, so what I wanted to do was talk a little bit about the mechanics of actually making things work. Because as you've seen, we've got the technology, but my question is, how do I actually integrate it into my business? And how do I actually make all this stuff work? Right? Somebody has to make sure that the network servers work and the license manager works and that we've selected all the right pieces and parts and nuts and bolts, and that falls to me. So that's the kind of things that I'd like to share with you a little bit. So how many of you work CAD managers? I know some of you from the Facebook group, so thanks for that. By the way, I want to get a CAD manager picture before we leave tonight. I'd like to state this. Albert Einstein's one of my personal heroes, and I'll always sneak something of his in any presentation I ever do. And one of the things that he's famous for saying is that if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. Well, I'd like to think that if Albert was a Bricscad CAD manager, he might say something like this: if you can't implement it simply, maybe we haven't thought through it well enough. And I do think we've thought through it well enough. That's one of the things that really attracted me to Bricscad and Bricsys, is I think they're doing a very good job at making some things straightforward to do that are somewhat painful with some of the other tools that are out there. So, as Don, I think, says, our friends. So to me, it really comes down to several parameters. And these are when I talk to business owners, when I talk to the chief information officers, the IT managers, the CAD administrators, it has to be flexible. It has to meet our needs. It has to be affordable, because if you can't afford it, what's the point? It has to be easy to deploy, because if it's not, your administrative costs will go up too high and it's too much of a pain to deal with. And it has to be learnable, because if we have to undertake a tremendous amount of training time or expenditure, that's going to be a problem as well. So these are kind of the 4 things that I always like to hit and talk about and make sure that you're aware of when we talk about Bricscad tools. As Don showed earlier, this is a comprehensive suite of tools that scales everything from essentially an AutoCAD LT level tool all the way up to an advanced mechanical or BIM tool, with one overlapping umbrella, which is called Ultimate, which gets everything. Everything is then tied together by a common data environment 24/7 to deal with things like collaborative, moving files around, all the types of things that you would classically think of in a document control paradigm. Here's what's cool about it. How many products do you need in a typical engineering firm right now that is Autodesk-centric? How many products do you need inside of that company to do low-cost 2D drafting, full-feature 3D CAD drafting, BIM, mechanical, and data management? You're going to implement LT, AutoCAD, Revit, Inventor, and Vault. That's 5 very different tools, and it's 5 sets of administrative burdens for me. And I hope I'm not boring anybody here, but I'm seeing a few heads nodding. What I can do here is I can basically install one tool. I can then toggle it or switch it to have more or less functionality based on what my user needs to do. But I don't have to manage 5 tools. I, in essence, really have to manage one CAD tool. And if I'm using the data management feature set for 24/7, that's 2. So straight away, it's a lot easier, simpler. Albert would be proud of what we've done by thinking through this. Another thing that even a few people clapped, I heard earlier, is that we do perpetual licensing, because we think it's what our customers want to have. Now, as a CAD administrator for years and years and years, 30 years or so, we always used to buy perpetual licenses. And we always were kind of used to buy it up front, pay a little bit of maintenance every year as you go to keep it current, and it would keep running for us. Does anybody remember what happened in 2008 and 2009 in the building economy? What happens if you're on a complete subscription-based licensing model and your business has dropped 90% and you can't afford to pay the software subscriptions anymore? What happens to your business? It stops, because the moment you quit paying rent, your software quits working. Now, I'm not saying that I want you to buy Bricscad and never update it and run it for 8 years, because I don't think you'll get the value out of it. But if you had to, you could. All right? So perpetuals offer you a business insurance plan that allows your company, users don't tend to think about this, but owners of companies and CAD admins and IT administrators do. So what we want to do is we want to get you back onto that perpetual model of operation, where you can go ahead and buy it up front, put it on a maintenance plan to keep it current. We do realize that there could be cases where you might have a project comes in and you're going to have higher headcount for a year. And maybe it makes sense to just rent some licenses for a lower amount of money for a year. But we won't force you to do that exclusively. We think you should have the ability to buy your licenses and rent them, mix and match as you see fit. It's your business, it's your set of unique problems, it's your choice. And that's really how we look at it. We believe that your license key should work for all languages, so we'll never try to charge you twice. If you want to run English languages in the US, but you want to run Spanish somewhere else, or you want to run German somewhere else, you do have to download a different version of the product, but you don't have to reauthorize it. You don't have to go through another licensing loop, no more contracts, nothing. Very simple. Again, I think Albert would be proud of our simplicity there. So this is a phrase that Don coined, which I really love. It's like one license key for planet Earth, or one license key to rule them all, or pick your sci-fi paradigm. You get what I'm pushing at here. All right, so we try to make it simple for you to acquire and authorize and license the tools. We also try to make it simple for you to afford. And here's what I mean. So I did a little workup on that, that other CAD product that's out there in the market, and did a little bar graph here. So what blue represents is the cost of purchasing Bricscad in year 1. What red represents is the cost of renting AutoCAD in year 1. And what the yellow or the gold represents is renting Bricscad in year 1. Hop to year 2, the rental continues, correct? But in Bricscad Perpetual, we drop down to a very low maintenance amount. Do the math, and what you're going to see is that purchasing Bricscad over 3 years is going to be about 40% the cost of renting AutoCAD. That's really, those numbers are correct. The ROI is that profound. You can get about a 200% return on your money over 3 years. And what happens at the end of 3 years if you don't want to continue maintenance? We keep running. What about them? I heard enough people clap earlier that I think you understand what I mean. I'd like to talk about a few nuts and bolts. So for those of you who get your hands on servers and get dirty with software and get bits and bytes on your fingers, a few things to just kind of throw out there. And by the way, I'm aware that I'm the last thing between you and cocktails, so I'm trying not to drag, okay? If you have questions for me, you can certainly ask later. We like to say if you can use AutoCAD, you can use Bricscad, and I really truly do believe that that's true. There are some differences in the product, yes. It's not a clone, so there will be some places where you'll say, well, that's not exactly like it. Well, Blockify is not exactly like AutoCAD. It's clearly superior. Parametrize is not like AutoCAD. It's clearly superior. So yes, there's going to be some differences. But we are, as Don mentioned earlier, we are command compatible, CUI compatible, macro compatible, so anything that you can build inside of the CUI. We are Lisp compatible. You can port your ARX code, C++ code that has been built for other applications, and you can bring that over into our customization environment as well and run. Our DWG compatibility, second to none, ODA, as Don was talking about earlier. So you just simply really do not have to worry about the fidelity of your data that's in our DWG file. I've not seen one not open. Now, as soon as I say that, somebody will come up with one. But in the 2.5 years I've been running this tool, I've not seen anything that won't open. I've seen things that open real quick. I've seen things that won't open in the other program that will open in Bricscad. So yeah, all those things are true. The reason why I like to spell this out, and it seems like a bit of a retread from earlier, I just want to put a little different spin on it. As a CAD manager, I understand that one of the biggest problems you face is you put a user in front of a new piece of software, what do? They freak out. Reflexively, it's what they do. It's new. I don't want to learn anything new, right? So what I'm doing with Bricscad for implementation is I'm saying, where are your blocks? Where are your palettes? Where are your Lisp routines? How do you run things? What do your menus look like? Please show me your custom ribbon elements. Let's bring them in. And let's make Bricscad look just like your users are used to. We've even done things where we turn the background color to a different color, or we turn the quad off, or we move the UCS icon to the lower left. You've got controls for all this. So if you're a system variable nerd or a Lisp nerd, come talk to me, because I can help you do this stuff. And we really can make it look just like your users are used to. I would far rather spend my time making Bricscad work as your users expect than spend a bunch of time training your users to learn a new CAD tool. Does that make sense? That's my whole philosophy on implementation. We have a range of products, as we saw, that spans everything from like a basic two-dimensional AutoCAD LT, but it runs Lisp, so you can customize it, which you can't do with LT, by the way. So you may find that a lot of people that you're presently having to put AutoCAD on their desktop just for Lisp portability, you may now be able to put Bricscad Classic on their desktop and save even more money because the Lisp will run. So that's another economic driver to consider. We're going to deal with perpetual licenses by default, but we're also going to allow you to do network or floating or concurrent use model. This is not complicated. This is the way that it used to work. So you can install Bricscad across all the machines you want, but only so many of them will run at any one time. Just the way that you would expect, and we do not charge a vulgar upcharge, right? I'll let you decide exactly what that means. We can get you standalone licenses that are in bulk. So we have a case where we have a company that does offshore ships, and they've got people trying to run AutoCAD on there, and there's no license server there, right? So they have to have an internet-free way or network server-free way, toy boat, in order to make that work. We will be able to put maintenance on anything to keep you up to date at a reasonable maintenance charge. But if you want to rent, you can rent single seats, you can rent seats that float around on the network. Here's the beautiful thing. Does it require named user licensing or 5 different licensing technologies to make it work? No, it runs on one license server. One license server, and you can borrow licenses just like you're used to, and all your Flex LT reporting tools that you've probably already got from JTB or whoever, they'll work on our license manager as well. So this is really a pretty transparent move for you as a CAD administrator. What I really like about the deployment of this that I've encountered so far is that everything for all Bricscad products is in one file, 375 megabytes in size. So sometimes people will ask, oh, well, this is just a clone of AutoCAD. Really? Have you seen the install size of AutoCAD lately? This code has been completely refactored. Way more compact, tight, right? That's a fast download, but it's a fast copy across your networks as well. So we can run it in silent mode, or your IT user can, your IT manager can kick it off as soon as somebody logs in, and away they go, right? So at this point, we've basically got a small, easy to manage set of deployment tools. One, pretty simple, right? How many deployment packages do you have to have now? And it's more than I want to have, right? So we also bring things to the table that just simply are not there in competing products. Some of the AI tools that you just saw, that are in the product now or maybe happening in the future, we don't know. But there's lots of cool things. When you pay maintenance with us, you're actually going to get something, right? It's not like you're renting just the same thing. You're actually seeing dynamic improvement in the product, and that's one of the things that really drew me to working with Bricsys. We also do support a system variable that's called MT flags, which is multi-threading control. It's bit-coded to the nth degree, very granular, so you can actually control whether you want to have multiple threads on various processes, depending on what tool you're running. I'm still experimenting with it, honestly, but I can tell you that there's some default settings up above like 512 bitcode values that run pretty nice. And my laptop is not anything really special. Did you happen to notice, like when Heidi was zooming around and doing things in 3D, did you notice how fluid that was? Graphics performance is really quite good, but I digress. The last thing that we kind of wanted to talk about, we talked about flexibility, affordability. We also wanted to talk about just the concept of trainability. How hard is it going to be for people to get going on this? Well, my philosophy, never abandon what you already know. Never ever. If people already know AutoCAD, then I want to put something that's very AutoCAD-like in front of them. Why? Because it reduces my training cost to as low as possible. And even then, people complain, right? What happens when you do a regular update? People still complain, right? So I really want to make that experience as familiar and similar for them as I possibly can. So to me, start with a familiar interface now, and then start introducing people to the additional things they can do in Bricscad or Bricscad Bim or Mechanical that they don't even know is possible yet. But I'm never going to get them to acknowledge the new things until I get them past the initial learning curve hump of getting into Bricscad simply, without a whole lot of learning curve for them. So what we've done to kind of address this, and this is something that Heidi's been instrumental in and has felt strongly about, is we need to make getting into Bricscad comfortable for AutoCAD users. So we want to have a 2D workspace that kind of feels like AutoCAD, for lack of a better term, to make that initial learning curve as easy as possible. Then we want to move people from that into a simple BIM interface that's not overwhelming, that doesn't have thousands of things to learn, just a handful of things across the top of the interface, as you saw. And same concept goes to the mechanical interface. So other than the white background, this looks pretty much like AutoCAD. And we can even show you how to change the color of the background. So if people really have a problem with that, yeah, we can fix it. All right? We can fix it. So I'm going to put them in here. I'm going to get them comfortable with Bricscad. We're going to reap the savings of that move for our company. And then we can take the same person who already knows AutoCAD, and we can move them very easily into, let's say, a BIM interface. Where Shazam, they have a file explorer on the left-hand side that looks and feels like the XREF manager. Because that's the technology we're using. So the good news is your work processes. You've spent 15 years getting people to understand XREFs. You don't have to start over. All right? You spent 15 years teaching people how to do mouse clicks. It's going to work the same in here. You don't have to start over. That's my point. So from a training point of view, I think Bricscad gives us a way to move 2D users into advanced 3D functionality quickly with minimal learning curve. And to users, I say minimal learning curve because they don't want to learn anything new. But to the boss, minimal learning curve means what? Money, savings, all right? So it's the same pitch, right? Time is money. So if I save the user time, I save the boss money. I may say it a little differently to the boss, but it's the same concept, right? So let me say just a couple of things and I'll wrap up very quickly here. We are, as Don mentioned, one of the founding and principal members of the Open Design Alliance. This basically allows us to be sure that our DWG compatibility is going to be as high as possible in the industry. It's been legally tested. This is a solution that's valid. You don't have to worry, are we going to break the DWG thing next week? No, we're not. Are you going to get sued next week? No, we're not. So these are some of the questions that I get asked. So I'll just be honest about saying that. So we have that fantastic fidelity with 2018 Dwg Format. You're going to be able to move things back and forth between programs. You're really not going to know the difference. And for our BIM approach, yes, we're using DWG elements as geometry, but from a database point of view, we're actually storing everything natively in IFC format. So what I've just outlined for you, but I didn't exactly say it this way, is that your information is stored in a publicly available second source DWG format. So you do not have to worry about somebody taking your information away from you. And your BIM data is stored in an industry standard IFC format that is broadly available, and you don't have to worry about anybody taking away from you. Can you say that about your current solution? Or are you single sourced? So, are you being forced to just pay rent because you're afraid you can't get out? This is a valid question to ask. And with Bricscad products, you're going to have your data protected in a way that you know you're going to be able to get at your data. I'm going to hold questions for just a minute because I'm almost done. Okay? It all adds up to me. I think we demonstrated that it's flexible. I think we demonstrated the affordability of Bricscad. I've shown you how to deploy it and described how it's really not a gut-wrenching experience to bring in Bricscad. It's actually pretty straightforward. And if you're a CAD manager, handy type person, as I know several of you in the room are, it would be my pleasure to work with you via phone, email, or whatever to help you get this tool up and running. Even if you just want to do it in a pilot mode, I'm perfectly happy to work with you to get this running.